In the chat option, you can talk to everybody, tell us where you're joining from, and introduce yourself. You have another section where you can pose your questions, which is the question mark tab. And then there's a third tab, which is the poll tab. And we'll be running polls throughout the session, and there you can vote. A quick introduction about myself. So my name's Carl, and I'm an FP&A analyst at Spendesk. If you haven't already guessed from my accent, I'm Australian, but I'm based here in France, and I'm joining you live from Paris. A little bit more about CFO Connect. So the CFO Connect Summit was created for finance leaders to connect and exchange on the most important topics affecting finance teams in 2023. And the CFO Connect is a global community of more than 10,000 finance leaders powered by Spendesk. Last thing, all the sessions at the CFO Connect Summit are being recorded, including this one, and we'll send you the recording as soon as we can. So without further ado, let's begin with Thuy-Vy, who will introduce herself and tell us a bit about her background.
Great, thank you, Carl. And hello, everyone. It's great to be here, and I'm really excited to talk about leadership in the FP&A function and exchanging ideas with all of you. I'm Thuy-Vy, currently head of strategic finance at Pigment. We are a B2B SaaS company, and we want to solve what keeps most of the FP&A teams busy, which is the planning part. So we built Pigment to help businesses grow as intelligently as they can, so having a line of sight of their own data in one place while having the flexibility to manage and drive decision-making processes. We have a presence in EMEA in North America and have been around since 2019. I joined Pigment 18 months ago, and prior to that, I spent a couple of years in another SaaS company doing that, doing what I enjoy most, essentially, which is solving problems and aligning stakeholders to drive processes forward. I really see my role as strategic finance or FP&A as being able to really understand the business, making the link with the numbers, and influence decisions to be a better leader in the organization. And we'll talk more about that right after.
Great. Thanks, Thuy-Vy. And Christian?
Hi, everyone. My name is Christian Wattig, and really excited to be here and talk about my favorite topic, that is FP&A. I spent more than 12 years in FP&A leadership roles in large consumer goods companies, Unilever, P&G. Then I was fortunate enough to lead an FP&A team at Squarespace when we took the company public. That's a tech company. Then I also worked at a smaller startup at an FP&A software company. But now I founded my own company. It's called FP&A Prep, and I teach FP&A skills to finance teams because I realized working across all these different industries, consumer goods, tech, large companies, small companies, that the challenges that FP&A teams face are very similar. It doesn't matter the size of the company or the industry you're in. It's things like, how can we get better forecast accuracy? How can we become better business partners and strategic advisors? And a number of other topics. And now I teach that through my training program called FP&A Bootcamp. And I also offer corporate training where I do custom-built FP&A training for larger companies. So really excited to be here and dive into this topic.
Great. Thanks, Christian. So our first question today is not actually for our presenters, it's for the audience. So there'll be a poll that should be activated in a second asking about what size company you work for. And that will really help us to tailor the answers to the different questions throughout the day so we understand if as the different size businesses and the FP&A function works differently. So it's a great way for us to understand what size business you work for and what's the best way to respond to your needs. And so now the first question for our presenters today is, what are the basics of FP&A? So maybe, Christian, you can start off first. Can you start by briefly explaining what FP&A is and why is it important for business leaders to understand it?
Sure. So FP&A stands for financial planning and analysis, but that only tells half of the story. When I train finance teams on how to run the FP&A process, I break it out into 4 core focus areas. There's financial storytelling, there's business partnering, there's financial modeling, and then lastly, there's planning, which is budgeting and forecasting. So to give you a concrete example of what that can look like, I thought I'll talk about a typical day from when I was working as an FP&A manager. So I arrive at the office at 8:45 a.m. and my Slack messages greet me already with an emergency. The board didn't approve the budget for the year, and that means back to the drawing board. We need to come up with ideas to get 2 additional percentage points in revenue growth within the next week, so not a lot of time, as usual. No problem. I immediately schedule a brainstorming session with the department heads of the commercial teams. Once that's done, my 9 a.m. meeting starts. It's about the variance analysis of the previous month. I present my work that shows the differences between actuals and forecast, and I focus on the differences that matter and separate them from the ones that can be ignored, either because they're immaterial or because they're clearly related to one-offs. After that, at 11 a.m., I finally have some time to work on my financial model for a new product launch. My company is working on a new ice cream flavor, and it's my job to figure out how much we can afford to spend on marketing based on the revenue estimates we got from the sales team. So I'm creating a discounted cash flow model for it to run and run sensitivities with it to find the break-even point where the project starts to make sense. My last meeting that day is with my marketing business partner. The goal is to determine what the forecast for marketing expenses will be for the next quarter. It's not an easy conversation because I have to share the news that we need to cut the budget. I'm sure, if you have been working in finance for any number of time, you probably had these tough conversations. So I spent the first 10 minutes explaining why we need to reduce our budget. Then we spent the next 20 minutes with creating different options and how to deal with that. I leave the meeting with the next step to estimate the revenue impact of the new marketing budget. So that's a typical day for an FP&A manager. As you can see, there are a lot of different things going on at the same time. I see it as a combination of puzzle solving, analysis, and working with people. And that unique combination is really what makes this career so interesting for me.
Thanks, Christian. And Thuy-Vy, do you have some thoughts on the topic?
I couldn't have explained FP&A better than Christian, so definitely agree with what has been said. I'm going to comment on the second part of your question, Carl, which is why it's important for business leaders to understand the FP&A role. And the way I see it is that other than the executives or CEO of a company, the FP&A is the team that sits across the whole organization and has a 360-degree view of what's going on. So they're in the best position to have strategic insights to bring to the table. Of course, as Christian mentioned, there are some milestones you need to master. You need to master the data. You need to master the reporting, the planning, but there is tremendous value to the business, once the team is able to work as partners to the rest of the organization. And of course, it can take some time, to get there. But I think that as leaders, it's important to align as early as possible the big picture of where the company is going with what the FP&A team can support on.
Okay, great. And I think it's a good segue to the next question that we have, which what are some of the ways that leaders can effectively communicate and collaborate with their FP&A teams? Thuy-Vy, do you want to start off with this one?
Yeah, sure. It all starts with building trust with your executive to show that you're on the same page and you're seen as an ally, and that's very important. And usually executives, they're very keen to get insights from the FP&A team for several reasons. The first one is that they're required to build a long-term vision, to look at choices, make decisions. And if you're able to help them visualize the financial implications of a decision, it's a win-win. So for example, you're working on a forecasting for next year, you're working on, let's say, the top line, and you're collaborating on anticipating different scenarios based on X, Y, Z factors so that leaders can proactively adjust their strategies. And the second one is that leaders, they also have a wide range of stakeholders to communicate with, either internally or externally. And they do that on an ongoing basis. So there is a constant need for them to be able to be on top of what's going on their performance. And this is where having a strong business partner, bringing recommendation or working closely with them on a storytelling strategy is extremely helpful to ensure continuous relationship. So to give you an example, at Pigment, when we have an important conversation ahead, let's see, we have a big meeting and we have all the different stakeholders around the table. And what we do beforehand is that we want to take the time to align each of the leaders so that we show them the data. We show what our suggestion will be so they can sort of pre-approve several things so that there's no big surprise during this big presentation. And to me, it seems quite obvious, but if you continuously nurture relationship like that, it would be beneficial because the next time there will be something going on or another project, then the team will definitely be looped in.
Okay, great. Thanks, Thuy-Vy. And Christian, your thoughts on the topic?
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Thuy-Vy said. It's so important to make sure that you align on things early. You make sure that there's no surprises in big meetings. Now, for me, really, how FP&A can add the most value is when we get the right information at the right time. So that means that leaders from the various departments should involve FP&A in the decision-making process. We need to have a seat at the table and be part of that, because then we can run financial models, we can build scenarios, and we can connect the dots. Because typically FP&A has a much broader view on the company. We are not in one silo. We can connect data from all across the company, from all the different departments, and that's how we can add value. So the key is that information is being shared with us when there's still enough time to actually do something about the decision, not after the fact. And you can facilitate this process in two ways. Either you establish a formal process or it's more relationship-based. Large established companies, typically they have a set policy to make sure that FP&A is involved and communicated properly. And so, for example, when I led FP&A teams at Unilever, so Unilever, for those of you who don't know, it's a large consumer goods company. It's the largest ice cream manufacturer in the world, but Unilever also has brands like Tide and Dove, in the personal care and in the beauty care space. And at Unilever, whenever there was a change to any of the products, even if it's just a change to the packaging material, FP&A had to be involved in the process. And the way that they were doing that is that called them different gates, where when you're just proposing a project, even there FP&A has to put together a model. But then when it gets closer to the decision point, FP&A, like no decision, no green light can happen unless FP&A built a business case, a financial model that looks in depth into, okay, what is the profit impact? What are the different sensitivities? What are the different scenarios? And that's a way to make sure that you never skipping that step of bringing in FP&A and having do the work. Smaller companies, they often don't have these formalized processes, and there it's also a little bit the responsibility of the FP&A team, because it all comes down to the relationship you have with your business partners. So what you can do as an FP&A manager to make sure you're kept in the loop is have regular check-ins. If you're in the office, just walk over to your business partner's desk and ask what they're working on, and ask if there's anything that's particularly challenging for them when it comes to decision making. Because often you can come up with a way to help them, to get them more visibility, to get them a different metric that they didn't even knew existed. So through these frequent check-ins, you get closer and closer to the business, and you not only hear more, but you're also seen more as a partner who actually wants to help and wants to do more than just creating fancy looking presentations and cutting budgets.
Yeah, thanks, Christian. Really insightful, and I think this transversal element of the FP&A role is something that's really valuable for leadership position members in a company. Just before I move to the next question, I see that we have one Q&A question. Really encourage all of our listeners to definitely add any questions they have live throughout the conversation, and we'll address them at the end of the presentation. So please use the tab on the right, add some Q&A questions in, and we'll address them at the end. Moving on to our next question. So what advice would you give to companies that are looking to set up an FP&A function from scratch? I see that from our poll at the start of the presentation that a majority of our listeners are in the 50 to 100 FTE range. So that's often a period of time where I know a lot of businesses start to think about FP&A and so on. So I think it's a good, very pertinent question. So maybe Christian, if you could lead off with some of your thoughts.
Sure. So before investing into hiring, your first FP&A analyst or retraining your accounting team to do FP&A tasks, I recommend you focus on data quality and data governance first, because the best FP&A manager can't really achieve much unless they have good quality data to work with. What does good quality mean? So it has to be accurate and it has to be up to date. And what I see, mistakes I sometimes see when it comes to data quality and governance is that companies sometimes don't have a single source of truth. That's really, for me, the starting point. Single source of truth means that each metric you're tracking, you're looking at, has to have one source and one definition and how it's defined. If different departments use a slightly different way to calculate metrics, big source for endless discussions later on, and really slowing down the process significantly, because you first have to agree what to look at. So have a single source of truth. And the other thing is to have an owner for each of the important metrics. And that owner has the responsibility to make sure that the metrics are up to date and that this single source of truth is being maintained. And then once you have data quality, data governance in place, then you can start implementing FP&A tasks. And what I would recommend you start with is create a forecast that is jointly done between your finance teams and the business teams, marketing, sales, R&D, product, whatever it is. Because if your finance team attempts to create a forecast in isolation, it will likely not be close enough to the business to really be useful. Typically, if finance does the forecast, it's very high level, it's very top down, and there's a risk that you will think a few months later, oh, maybe this whole FP&A thing isn't working for me. But the magic starts to happen when finance combines their analytical capability and understanding how the company makes money with the business knowledge and the insights from the other departments. So you create a forecast together. It could be that your marketing team creates a bottom up, the finance team creates a top down, and then you discuss and you compare the two to each other, and that's how you figure out what's the best solution forward. Or you jointly create the forecast. And then over time, this will not only lead to a forecast that you can actually really make decisions from, but also it will build the business acumen of your FP&A team. And that's so important. That's the foundation for any other higher level work later on, like scenario planning, for example. So start with a joint forecast that's done by your finance team together with your business teams.
Yeah, I think it's really critical. Data quality is such an important element of the FP&A function, and so it's a really good starting point, I think, to begin with. Thuy-Vy, do you have some thoughts on the topic as well?
Yeah, I think it's to sort of retrace it back to the size of the company. It's usually the case when you're building a broad finance team, and then the finance leader is wondering, okay, so which profile am I going to bring in first? When I'm going to build the team. I think it's usually about making sure that the data is accurate. So having the accounting part, ready, the house in order, the processes there, so that then we can have, we can build the FP&A function and we can do all the analysis that we want to do. On the one source of truth, that's definitely one of the main sort of pain points, I would say, for a lot of companies. It's still, it's still having, when you work with people in the operations team, people in the finance team, and they're using different set of data. And it's always very difficult to come when you present to executives, for example, if you don't have, one voice or looking at the same data. What I've seen happening is that you would go to a meeting, there was someone from operations or from data and someone from finance, and they would look at two different set of metrics, and then you don't spend the time during the presentation just making decisions or discussing the topic, but you would rather spend it sort of, questioning the data, asking, okay, why is this number there? Why is this number there? Can you explain? So I think definitely having the house in order, having owners, to make sure the data is correct, that everyone is aligned around that is crucial when you build the FP&A function.
Okay, great. Thanks, Thuy-Vy. And so looking forward, so once you've constructed an FP&A function, the next question is more about how do you then go on to embed this FP&A team, and how do you structure your FP&A team moving forwards? Thuy-Vy, do you want to start off with this one?
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen many ways an FP&A team can be structured. So either you want to have it, dispatched per geography or per teams. You want to have it centralized, decentralized. It can varies a lot depending on the organization. So I think it all depends to what matters to the business. So if you think of the growth is something that matters for the business, then you might think of having someone dedicated to the go-to-market strategy. Or if there is a rapid expansion in several entities, that it might make sense to have someone dedicated per country. What we did at Pigment is more the first option, meaning that we have people dedicated per main team. So they are identified as business partners, and they would be working with their stakeholders from, they can do everything from reporting to planning. We have people looking after go-to-market. We have people looking at, for example, we have a team doing professional services. So we also have someone looking after that team. And we're also going to have someone looking at the R&D function. So that's a bit how it works at Pigment. But again, it varies a lot depending on the organization structure.
Okay, cool. And Christian, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with Thuy-Vy that there is no one ideal structure for an FP&A team. It really comes down to how your company is structured, the complexity at the different levels. I do think, though, that it's probably helpful for people to know what the common options are for structuring your FP&A team. And I look at it from the perspective of hierarchy and roles and responsibilities. So from a hierarchy point of view, the traditional approach is that the FP&A team reports to the CFO, right? But there's a different approach as well that that a lot of larger companies, but I've also seen more medium-sized companies that they choose, which is FP&A nominally reports to the CFO, but they also have a dotted line relationship with department heads. So for example, there may be a marketing FP&A team who has a dotted line reporting to the chief marketing officer. And that means that the finance function is still responsible for managerial tasks like performance ratings, formal feedback discussions, but the department heads have a major say in setting the priorities of their FP&A partners. And the advantage can be that you bring the FP&A team closer to the day-to-day of these teams, which then helps them create better forecasts and financial models. But regardless of the hierarchical structure, you need to think about how you organize your team. And also there are two higher level ways of doing this. Either you organize your team by having them partner with a certain part of the organization. So for example, part of your team partners with sales, and then they do everything related to that, all the reporting, the consolidation, the forecasting, the budgeting, the analysis. Another team partners more with HR for headcount. Another team partners more with R&D. That's one way of doing it. That way, your FP&A analysts are more generalists. Or you can do a different approach where you specialize the roles more. So that's where you have one analyst who only does consolidations, for example, one analyst who does forecasting across all the P&L lines in the company, one analyst who does budget management, etc. And they have pros and cons. The main disadvantage, the advantages of having that specialization I just mentioned is that you can hire for very specific skills, and you can train people to become very effective at what they do. The disadvantage is that there are some roles that are just more repetitive. For example, if all you do is consolidation, it can be, you have to think about how you enrich that role. You have to maybe have a rotational system for these roles. So there are pros and cons, but this is how I would roughly structure, how I would look at structuring an FP&A team. So from a hierarchical point of view, do you want it to report only to the CFO, or do you want to have a dotted line relationship with the business teams? And then from an organizational point of view, do you want your FP&A team members to be generalists, or do you want them to specialize on a given task?
Okay, great. There's some fantastic insights there, Christian. So earlier we spoke a little bit about data quality, source of truth, and so on. So we have one more poll for you today, and it's about whether or not you use an FP&A tool within your business. So I believe that'll be launched on the right. So feel free to answer along and give us back a little bit of feedback about whether or not you use an FP&A tool at your business. And so moving on to the last question for today. And so it's about how do you envision the role of FP&A evolving in the next 5 to 10 years? So looking really into the future of where FP&A will be 5 to 10 years from now. Christian, do you want to start off with this one?
Yeah, so automation is advancing quickly in the field, as I'm sure many of you know. AI is moving very quickly. There are a lot of companies, a lot of software companies working on developing ChatGPT for finance, right? Who will start to take over a lot of the repetitive tasks, and even some of the not so repetitive tasks like analysis. But still today, many FP&A teams I work with spend half of the month essentially crunching the numbers, preparing detailed Excel reports, or putting together an elaborate PowerPoint presentation. And all of this will go away in the near future, because all of this, cleaning your data, getting your data in the right format you need it to, formatting it, even doing simple repetitive analysis tasks and creating financial presentations, all of this will be automated with AI and automation tools. So FP&A leaders need to make sure that they can add value in other ways. Otherwise, there's a risk of becoming obsolete. Fortunately, FP&A that's also another thing I really love about FP&A, is that there's a lot of other areas that have a lot of depth, how you can really become a strategic advisor. So, for example, you can work on your business partnering skills, and that you will always need to influence others. We always need to present the story in a way that it's really tailored to the audience. So that's really something that won't go away. And if you do it right, you will be seen as a strategic advisor. And you can learn how to do root cause analysis effectively. So that's figuring out what drives the variances and how we can take that and make a concrete recommendation about how the company can grow the top line, become more profitable. In some sense, that's the ultimate goal of FP&A, right? And you can also invest in your forecasting skills. So you can use multiple techniques in parallel. Probably a lot of the forecasting will be automated, but you still have to combine the outputs of different techniques and look at the differences and really make sense of it. So you should invest into building your skills there. And in my training program, FP&A Bootcamp, we cover all of these skills.
Great, thanks, Christian. And Thuy-Vy, what are your thoughts about the direction of FP&A moving forwards?
Yeah, so I think a lot about what Christian just said. So it's all about automation, ability to automate as much as possible, data collection, processing information, so that really teams can focus on strategic recommendation, and this is where they're going to bring more value to the company, and this is how they're going to be closer to the business. So we've seen a lot of changes over the past years. The finance team is no longer the team that just crunch the number, but they're becoming more strategic, more closer to the business. And that goes also with, of course, using the right tools to have this agility to make decisions based on real-time data, for example, because we're living in a really fast-paced environment. So we have priorities that are shifting, especially for those of you who are working in startups or scale-ups. That when you come to the office one day and there is one priority, and then the next day there is something else, and then when you do a budget, you need to different scenarios, and then you redo everything from scratch. We've all been there, but I think tomorrow, I think we need to be able to be better at this, to be able to spend like less time to crunch the data, but more time to do the analysis that matters here. And also, I'm a really strong believer of the role becoming more collaborative, meaning that although you have each team with specific targets or ambition, I think there's always room for cross-functional work, and FP&A teams can definitely support aligning interest and ensure that each team have everything they need, the analysis, the information, to perform at their best.
Okay, great, Thuy-Vy. Yeah, I think that the future, the collaborative aspect of FP&A is so important, as we've spoken about throughout today. The different stakeholders that you interact with, it's such a key element of the FP&A business. We'll move on now to the Q&A section of today's session. So thank you everybody who's asked some questions on the right-hand side. So again, if anybody has any questions, it's not too late. Feel free to use the Q&A tab on the right of your screen to ask any more questions. And so the first question is from Anonymous, and the question is, what KPIs do you consider most important to measure the effectiveness of FP&A efforts? So how does FP&A analyze FP&A itself? Maybe Christian, you want to start off here?
Sure, happy to get started. So I look at it in the terms of efficiency and effectiveness. So from an efficiency point of view, you can look at how much time does it take until the FP&A team has the forecast fully reconciled. So that means explaining the variances of the forecast with your actuals and your budget. And then the other one is the time it takes to create the monthly reporting deck, right? Because that's really the must do for the month. It includes all the reporting. And then after that, the team can spend more time on higher value add activities. And that's where effectiveness comes in. So the way I look at an FP&A team's effectiveness is first, how much cost-saving opportunities have they identified, and what's the dollar amount of that? Really hard dollars. And then also, likewise, what's the dollar amount of growth opportunities that they have identified through their financial analysis, through connecting the dots, through their works with the forecast. And of course, there's forecast accuracy, of course, especially important when you're a public company or when you're working on getting more investors on board. And then there's also the quality of the decision support. So that's a little bit harder to put a dollar amount on, but a really important task of FP&A is to help leaders make better decisions, right? Mostly around investments. So let's say you're making a big investment, you're increasing your budget, you're launching a new product. It's important then to go back and do a post-launch analysis to see where were you correct, where can you learn something. That's also a way of how to evaluate FP&A. And then last but not least, it's about process improvement, because an effective FP&A team should always think about, how can I make the processes easier for everyone involved? How can I save time in the month-end close process? How can I get the slides together faster? How can I make the life of my business partners easier and remove bureaucracy and all that? So yeah, that's how I would look at evaluating an FP&A team.
Some great insights there, Christian. And Thuy-Vy, do you have some thoughts?
Yeah, I would say that when you have a lean team, because some of the companies don't have a really big FP&A team. And the way I see it is that you're able to balance, the quality of the execution, of course, with sometimes taking shortcuts, in a sense that I believe in the 80-20 rule, meaning that you don't need sometimes very detailed analysis or super complex model to explain something. And most of the time when you work with the executives, it's about bringing up something that makes sense, something that can be easily explained. And if you get lost in details, etc., first you're going to lose a lot of time because you're going to be crunching numbers. Then you might be prone to errors. Then I would really suggest to keep things simple first, so that they would just free you time, especially for leaner organization, to be able to have your focus elsewhere. Definitely in terms of the organization. So if your team is effective, it means that yes, you don't have to hire many people. So that's because you have processes in place, because you have the right tools, because you've identified where to put your focus on, and that's very key for me.
Okay, great. Thanks, Thuy-Vy. So we'll move on to the next questions. The next question is about what are the technical skills that are needed to excel in the FP&A role, tools or skills that would help you to save some time, etc. So maybe Christian, you can lead off again with this one.
Sure. So from a technical skill point of view, to succeed in FP&A, you definitely need to know basic accounting. You don't need to be a CPA. You don't need to even have an accounting major. I don't have an accounting major. I have a finance major. But you need to understand the basics, because that's how you make sense of the P&L and the balance sheet and how the decision you're making connect with the financials in the company records. Then Excel, really important, especially for more junior roles. But fortunately, now Excel is a lot easier to manage and to learn than before, because now we have free tools like ChatGPT. You can go to ChatGPT and you can describe the challenge you have with your Excel spreadsheet in great detail, and it will tell you step by step where you need to click, what you need to do, what all the formulas are, which formula to use. Because that to me was always like a big, can sometimes be a big hurdle, is that people don't know what all the different ways are that Excel can help you, and all the different formulas and ways to automate with Excel. So ChatGPT is a great tool to learn for that. And then for me, technical skills are actually not the most important thing to succeed in FP&A, I would argue, because you can always learn, accounting, Excel, all that. When I was hiring FP&A analysts and managers, I was more looking for the more interpersonal and more higher level skills, because they're sometimes harder to train. Now it's things like, can you take a complex topic and translate it to very easy to understand terms, for people that don't have a financial background? Do you have attention to detail? Of course, very important, because accuracy is super important. But then also, do you have the ability to take a step back and look at the big picture? Can you pull yourself out of those details? That's always something I was trying to tease out in the interviews for my FP&A roles. And because that's how you can start making connections, and how you can start uncovering insights. Then, of course, you need to be comfortable with walking over to someone and saying things like, really sorry, but we have to cancel your favorite project, things like that. So you have to be comfortable with tough conversations, because often those are the opportunities where you can move the needle, especially if you can do these things while still protecting your professional relationship.
Okay, great. Thanks, Christian. And Thuy-Vy, some thoughts on the skill set required to be a good FP&A analyst?
I think definitely be comfortable with numbers, generally speaking. I think that's the first thing. Of course, as Christian mentioned, you don't have to be an accountant. You don't have to, but you need to be comfortable around numbers and have attention to details. And I think the next step is definitely be able to communicate effectively, be able to collaborate with other business partners, and not being afraid also to sort of sometimes say no as well, to push back things. I think that's something that I say as well to my team, and also be able to have, because an FPA role sometimes can be quite especially during budget season, especially during reforecast season, it can be very grueling. It can become very tense. So have the ability to be resilient as well, because things are changing, and sometimes analysts are asked to redo different analysis there and there. But I think if they have the ability to be resilient and be able to see the big picture and see also why they're doing this, it also helps.
Great, thanks, Thuy-Vy. And I think it's a great segue to the next question, actually, speaking about budget and reforecasting. So we have a question from Gervasio. So how do we implement, just move from here. How do we implement a rolling forecast process that produces accurate estimates, but without disrupting the business from their regular operations? So obviously a big subject for a lot of FP&A teams at this time of year is the budgeting process. So how do you balance out providing accurate estimates without using too many of the resources within the business to do so? So Thuy-Vy, do you want to start with this one?
Yes, I would say on this, if you're able to automate as much as possible, have a model where that you can easily update it on the go, so you can only pull out the information easily. That's definitely something that you can look at. All the FP&A tools are available on the markets today. We have a lot of them, and they're usually helping to do that. So what they do is that they would centralize all the information, so you will be able to plug your platform to your ERP systems or to your other systems, and then basically you would have the data live. So basically your model will already be built in this platform. So that would save you tons of time, without disrupting your regular operation. Like if you have to do things on the ongoing basis, it means that you should be also able to shift from doing forecasting or from looking after the ongoing project that you would have.
Thanks, Thuy-Vy. And Christian?
Yeah, I would add two things to that. First of all, 100% agree that automating as much as possible is important, especially when that saves time for the broader business. But I would make sure that, first of all, everyone at the other departments understand why you're doing the forecast and how it can help them. Because ideally, a forecast can help them achieve their goals, right? By showing how their work will translate into better growth, better performance, and then it's easier for you to argue to help them get more budget, which is always what people want, right? They want more money to do more amazing things. And so a good forecast can actually help them do that. So that's where I would start. I would position it to them that actually, hey, I'm actually helping you. You're helping yourself by helping me with the forecast. And the other thing and how you can make that easier is try to join operational meetings if you can. Try to join the meeting where the R&D team discusses, new product launches, new features that they're trying to add, for example, because then you're not creating an additional meeting for them. You're not creating additional work, but you're listening and you hear and you hear what's going on. And then you can ask very pointed questions. You can say, hey, I heard we're planning to add this new feature and it sounds like it's a really big deal. Can you tell me a bit more about that and how you think, this may influence our growth trajectory? And that way, I think, it's a very natural way of partnering with the business to do your forecasting.
Okay, thanks. Great question. One last question I think we have time for. Well, I think it's quite a quick question. And so the last question is about what are some of the FP&A tools you recommend for retail business, but maybe more broadly as well, are there FP&A tools that are specifically tailored to certain industries? Christian, maybe first.
So I have to say I'm not as familiar with the retail industry specifically, but whenever I get the question about, hey, which can you tell me about the FP&A tools, about the market, which tool should you choose? I always advise people, okay, first you need to think at a high level. How do you want to approach this? Do you want to replace Excel or do you want to build on top of Excel? It really comes down to the complexity of your business. But there are tools that do either of those things, and there are great tools, and there are more and more tools coming to the market, and they're also much more affordable than they used to be just 5 years ago. So the advantage of staying in Excel is that people don't have to learn a new tool. They can keep doing what they were already doing. But then the advantage of getting replacing Excel is that things can be much more seamless, things can be more automated and less prone to errors from typing a wrong formula into an Excel model. So there are pros and cons with both, but that's how I would start.
Great. And Thuy-Vy?
Yeah, so I'm going to be a little bit biased here, but I think there's, yes, again, plenty of tools on the market, and most of them, don't specialize in terms of the how do you say that, the business case that you want to build. So you can, if you want to do supply chain analysis, or you want to do other type of analysis. Usually, most of the tools are you're able to do that in those tools. So I would say yes. So it really depends on the objective. Really depends on if you're looking at a tool where you have already in mind, like a specific business case that you want to build, and also how this tool can help you. If this tool can allow you to connect your different sources, if you're also willing to learn a new language, a new way of working. As Christian says, some of them are already embedded into Excel that most of you are already using, or if you're happy to go with something different. So that really depends on each organization.
Okay, great. Thanks, Thuy-Vy. Well, thank you, everybody. That's all we have for today. So first off, thanks to Christian and Thuy-Vy for their time. I think the insights they provided were really valuable to anybody that's exploring, introducing FP&A, that's a leader working with an FP&A team and so on. So thank you both for your time. For anybody that's interested, there's a demo beginning in 10 minutes for Spendesk, which is a spend management solution. So feel free to jump on that call. But otherwise, thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining today, and have a nice rest of your day.
Thank you.